Welcome to the Ellevate podcast, conversations with women changing the face of business. And now your hosts, Kristy, Wallace, and Maricella, Herrera.
Hello and welcome to the Ellevate podcast. This is your host, Kristy Wallace, with my co-host, Maricella Herrera. Maricella, good day to you.
Good day, sir. Good day to you, too.
Every time I finish the intro, I'm always like, okay, like, what do I say next? How do I make this punchy and fun?
Punchy and fun is hard.
Well,
words are hard.
Especially for someone who is neither punchy nor fun, but I try.
You're punchy and fun. You are. You are.
All right. You say so, Maricella. So we have a really cool guest today.
Yes, we do. So I had a great time talking to Dr. Jennifer Mieres about her journey. Mm-hmm. But most importantly, she's one of the leading experts in cardiology for women specifically. And it was honestly a very enlightening conversation about the healthcare system, about heart health, and about how we as women can actually be more aware and more proactive in taking care of, heart health, which is really one of the biggest killers of women anywhere.
Yeah, I didn't know that stat, and that's why we're so excited to have Dr. Jennifer on the podcast because, one, for so many reasons. For me, it was, as we talk about conversations with women changing the face of business, that manifests in so many different ways. It's in the not-for-profit sector, it's in the for-profit sector, it's solo entrepreneurs, it's authors and experts and women in corporate America. And there's a huge number of women in healthcare and in, education and a whole other sectors that I feel like we don't often hear their stories. And it's really important to us at Ellevate to be very intentional about how diverse our community is and understanding not just, how do women get into these spaces, but how are they changing the way healthcare looks? It affects every single one of us. So knowing you have an advocate for you internally is huge. And then also, how do we take better care of our health? We're inundated with different messaging and pills and this and that. But having an expert really talk to you about what you can do today and every day to protect yourself is like having that advocate in your corner.
Yeah, I keep thinking about our conversation the other day when you and I were talking about prioritization and where health lies within your priorities. Because I would have never said it's one of my highest, which is silly. But actually with Jennifer, we were talking, she did the midnight run too in Central Park on New Year's Eve.
That's amazing.
And so we kind of talked a little bit about running and how exercise and really taking care, like preventative and being aware of your health and doing stuff to be on top of it has to be number one thing on your list.
All right. Well, I love that. That's really important. And let's hear from Dr. Jennifer.
Jennifer, I'm so happy to have you join us today for the podcast to talk about something that is incredibly important and that we don't talk about enough, which is women's heart health. And as always, though, at Ellevate, we want to learn from you and from your career and your journey. So I would love to start with a little bit of a personal background. And if you could tell me what led you to what you're doing today.
So I am delighted to be here. It's February. It's Heart Month. So this is an important time and timely. So thank you for having me and thank you for introducing the topic. And, I just want to start off by saying we want, and I am on a personal journey, to have women know that their health is their most important asset. And so needs to be managed just like you manage your checkbook, your car, your home. I became interested in medicine almost, oh my goodness, a long time ago when I was age 7. So I grew up in Trinidad, was very close to my grandfather, and at 7, he passed away of a massive heart attack. And it was traumatic for me, and I couldn't understand why we couldn't prevent his heart disease. So I was on the mission to become a doctor because I was determined that no one else should die from heart disease, and I wanted to learn a lot about it. So you fast forward, I'm on the track to becoming a doctor. I went to Bennington College. And at Bennington, they had just started a small pre-med program, but it was fascinating because at Bennington, my creative side, my creative brain became alive. And so thinking of medicine, I was on the focus on becoming a doctor, but it also sort of sparked sort of an interest in how we could better communicate and how we can educate people about, health and well-being. Went to BU for medical school. And then came to New York to train at what is now Mount Sinai, which was St. Luke's Hospital. Mm-hmm. And during that time, and in medical school, I met an amazing female cardiologist, Dr. Alice Jacobs, who definitely inspired me to continue on the path to cardiology. Then I met Dr. Judith Hochman in training. And what was fascinating was that she's a researcher, internationally known researcher. We were enrolling people into clinical trials because stopping a heart attack with clot-busting agents had just hit the market. And so in enrolling patients, we started to notice that only men fit the criteria to be enrolled, that women were coming in with their heart disease much later, so they were not eligible. They were not leaving the hospital in as good a shape as men. And so Dr. Hochman sort of sparked my interest in saying, why is there this gender difference? You fast forward, I finished my training, I'll go to work at North Shore in Manhasset, and then along the way met some amazing people across the country who were asking the same questions. Dr. Nanette Wenger, Dr. Leslie Shaw, Dr. Sharon Hayes, Dr. Stacy Rosen, who I work with. Why are we seeing women much later? Why are they dying? Why are they not surviving? And we have all this great technology. And so began my interest and research in studying some of the gender differences in heart disease. So cardiology and looking at gender disparities became sort of my focus. I'm a cardiac imager, so I did nuclear cardiology, and then got involved with the American Heart Association to write guidelines and to study the science of some of the gender differences. Along the way, I, continued to volunteer for the AHA, to become actively involved in the Go Red for Women movement, understanding the science, writing the guidelines, how we treat different women differently, how we understand all the nuances, and then sort of branching out to empower women through patient education, through books, through documentaries, storytelling, to really give women the tools to understand all that 80%, as the American Heart Association says, 80% of heart disease is preventable with simple lifestyle changes. So I've become sort of a clinician, scientist, educator, and now sort of focusing on disparities, on the elimination of disparities.
It's honestly incredible, everything, because you are wearing a lot of different hats. You are, like you said, a researcher, you're educating, you're also a faculty professor, chief diversity and inclusion officer at Northwell Health. So you're doing all of these things. And how do you manage, and how do these roles interact in your day-to-day life?
So starting with sort of becoming a cardiologist in hibernation, when I was at NYU, left NYU to go back to Northwell to become the first chief diversity and inclusion officer, what I decided is that we are all on the same mission, right? Mm-hmm. In healthcare, we are on the mission to health and wellness. And the 21st century requires that we see our patients and their communities as partners. So changing the model of healthcare delivery, where people are partners in their health, and the healthcare team, it's not only the doctor, it's the nurse, it's the social worker, it's every single person contributing to health and wellness is sort of the big umbrella. So when you think of healthcare delivery and health for dealing with the epidemic of chronic diseases in the 21st century, it requires a different model of healthcare delivery where everyone is on the same team. It's the nurse, it's the doctor, patient and their families, the social worker, or the nutritionist, all of us on the team to the journey for health and wellness for patients and their communities. So therefore, when you think of, I look at my role as Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, it's all linked to faculty affairs as well as, being in charge of the Center for Equity of Care, because it's really looking at what do we need to do as a healthcare team in partnership with our patients and communities to deliver healthcare and improve health outcomes. And that means to make sure that everyone is living a healthy and a good quality of life. It means we have to focus on empowered people, right? So people need to be educated. People need to understand what their role is in the journey to health and wellness. They have to feel that partnership. We have to focus on elimination of disparities, because we recognize that 80% of health outcomes depends on everything other than the medical encounter. That means you and I can see each other. We have like a 10-minute or 20-minute visit, even if we have an hour. And I've made the diagnosis of, say, okay, maybe you have hypertension or whatever. You still, after our visit, you have to go home and follow the treatment plan. Well, what if you and I have a discussion and I know that maybe the family didn't believe in taking blood pressure pills? We factor that in. Maybe in terms of dietary changes, there's certain foods that are important to you that we need to tweak a little bit, right? What about your cultural beliefs, right? So it has to be a plan, where you and I co-create and customize something that will work for you and make sure that you're sticking to the treatment plan is sustainable. So that's the elimination of disparities, and that's the diversity piece. And then when you think of understanding what the healthcare team needs in terms of healthcare delivery, the faculty needs to be sort of on the same page, right? So we're training medical students, as we do at the Zucker School of Medicine, which is a new curriculum. We're now in our 10th year, where they recognize that patients are their partners, that culture, that language, all of these factors need to be included. And so when you think of faculty affairs, how do you restore joy in the workplace for physicians, for the healthcare team? How do you incorporate, the contributions to teaching and to the community to make sure that the faculty are all happy and leading, on this journey to health and wellness? So it ties in. And then women's health is sort of a passion of mine. And so looking at the elimination of gender disparities, hearing the stories of our patients, customizing our care in all departments so that we deal with the sex and gender aspects, that it's not one size fits all. It all comes together.
It's so interesting to me, and you're right. And I guess you don't think about it that much, or I don't think about it that much since I'm not in the field, but it's when we talk about companies and we talk about different stakeholders, not just, the focus on shareholders, but the community, the workers, the customers and clients. And then you also talk about diversity and inclusion within companies. When you translate that into the healthcare field, it's so much more complex and so much more complicated. And like you were saying, culturally, how many shades of cultural backgrounds influence people and the decisions they make. Like we were just talking about food and dietary information from this awesome book you gave me, which is in Spanish, about women's heart health, and how that, even the Spanish version of that book, has to be revised so that the nutritional information makes sense culturally for the people who read it. And I would have never thought about it. It's fascinating.
So, it's all about co-creating a care plan, a treatment plan that will work for you and make sure that it's sustainable. Because if you look at heart disease, where, as per the American Heart Association, and I've been actively involved in their Go Red for Women campaign for the past 16 years, women share their stories. We have increased awareness. But if we do not sort of make it part of your DNA and it's co-created so that it's applicable to you, you're not going to translate into action, right? So we, and me personally and all of my colleagues, on this journey to get women to see their health as their most important asset. I used to joke when I saw patients for over 20-something years, and I would say, okay, you're coming to see me. Let's think about it. If you're going to see your accountant on tax day, do you show up empty-handed? You come with all of your receipts, right? And so your health and your body is you have to bring that information, is yours. And I do not have ESP. So you have to tell me, how I've been feeling. So I'm a big believer in writing down information, coming with the information, so then we could have a discussion. And that is the sign of a true partnership, right?
Yes.
So you share the information and we can figure out, okay, what's going on? Let's co-create a plan that will work for you.
Yeah. So as an expert, you get this question a lot, but I'm still going to ask it. What's the reality of heart disease in the U.S., and what are the best preventative measures we can take?
So this question about heart disease in the U.S. is coming at a great time. The American Heart Association just released the most recent statistics, and we're always about a couple years behind, right? So you look at the trend, and in 2017, the last year we have statistics available, heart disease still the number one killer of men and women in the United States. We have crossed the curve. We have more men dying than women, but up until a few years ago, it was the exact opposite.
Really?
The important thing about heart disease, and still the leading killer across the world, as a matter of fact, still the number one killer of men, number one killer of women, 80% of heart disease can be preventable. And so the American Heart Association has come up with Life Simple 7, a lot about lifestyle changes. They want, in the Go Red for Women campaign, women to know their risks, right? So you should know the family history, whether you have high blood pressure, whether you have diabetes, simple things, simple factors, your cholesterol profile, your blood sugar profile, right? And so knowledge is power. So knowing whether you're at risk for heart disease, and that begins in your 20s, right? You can tweak your lifestyle. You can take medication, if appropriate, to control risk. So that's the number of 80% of heart disease is preventable. I would say that in 2020, we have great technology. We have great medications. We can abort heart attacks. People are living much longer. The important thing is really knowing your risk and taking the lifestyle changes. And I will say one thing, new piece of evidence in the past 5 years, through the research, the gender research from the American Heart Association, we know that women share many risk factors, same with men. And again, high blood pressure, elevated cholesterol, sedentary lifestyle, if your blood pressure is elevated, if you're diabetic, your HDL cholesterol, all of those levels. But we now know that women who have had pregnancy-related complications, such as high blood pressure in pregnancy, diabetes in pregnancy, preeclampsia and eclampsia, 5 to 15 years later are at risk of having heart disease. And we're seeing younger women showing up with heart attacks, completely out of the blue. And when we trace back, we can see that there were risk factors, the pregnancy-related factors, that were ignored.
Interesting. I didn't know that at all, which I guess is part of what you're trying to do, which is educating people and making sure that they know what factors they have to be aware of. And like you said, okay, making sure you have the information, you know where you are, where your levels are, and if you are at risk or not. But then in the lifestyle changes, what are the most common things that we should and could be doing?
So I think I'm a big believer of a few things. Choosing to move every day is definitely important.
And as I realized you're a runner, because we apparently did a run together.
I know.
We didn't know of.
Except I know the midnight run in Central Park, which I did with my husband. We sort of figured a great way to start the new year. And believe me, I've been sticking. So I sort of run, because I'm protecting the knees. So,
yes.
But so choosing to move every day, and the American Heart Association recommends 150 minutes of activity every week. So you think that's not that much, right? And it includes walking, running, jogging, cycling, dancing, swimming, whatever you'd like to do. The important thing about the 150 minutes is that you could get it in increments of 10 minutes, right? And in the era of wearables, your wearables could keep you on track. So choosing to move, and that's good for heart disease, for controlling your blood pressure, keeping your weight in check, controlling your cholesterol and blood sugar levels, definitely important. Important for women as we hit the menopause period, right, where everything sort of changes. Having a colorful plate, I like to say, so, we could say healthy eating styles, but I'd like to say make your plate colorful.
Get fun.
Because if you have a colorful plate, there are, probably fruits, vegetables, right? And small portions of protein. So a colorful plate, the Mediterranean diet, has been shown to be fantastic. The American Heart Association has something called the DASH diet to stop hypertension, similar to the Mediterranean diet. And it's something you could go on the website and get lots of recipes. Now, in terms of women and also new research, the evidence is now evolving. Sleep, getting at least 7 hours of sleep at night, truly important.
That's my problem.
That's your problem, right? So sleep hygiene is important, and controlling stress. Chronic stress, we're all exposed to stress, but figuring out a way to mitigate stress, or in that moment when you're stressed about something, hitting the pause button, definitely important. So meditation has become sort of like a very popular thing and useful thing. Now we have the science with meditation to show what it does. So those are some key things, right? And the other thing I would say, and we talk about it in our book, Heart Smart for Women, 6 Steps in 6 Weeks, we talk about the partnership. We feel, and I know this for a fact, just on personal level, that if I have a friend or a family member or partner that's in doing a exercise or movement challenge with me, I'm going to stick to it, right?
Yeah.
And then the partnership with your doctor, right? Your doctor should really be someone that you feel knows you and you have a relationship with, that you could co-create a strategy that works for you.
You come back to having your health squad in this case.
Yes.
You have to have your doctor. You have to have those conversations. You have your accountability buddy. We can do another race.
Yes,
Can sign up for one.
We can sign up, yes.
But it's true. You're right. And honestly, like a lot of those things that you just said aren't that hard or time consuming. It's more about being mindful and doing them, being sure to walk a little and put some veggies on your plate, and meditation, which I'm a huge fan of.
I'm with you as well.
So, yeah. So on top of everything else you're doing, I want to talk about this because I am very excited. And I started watching part of it. You have a new documentary, and I know you produced a few in the past, but this new one, Misdiagnosed, has just been accepted to 2 film festivals. It has some really important stories and messages to get out there. So can you tell me a little bit about it?
So I would start by telling you, how I got into the documentary business, because I want to say a shout out to Barbara Paskoff, who used to run Envision Productions. And as I mentioned, we were talking before we met, and she said to me, you people in the medical community need to share information in a slightly different way. And what about the power of storytelling? So Barbara and our team at North Shore LIJ, which is now Northwell, we produced A Woman's Heart back in 2001. And it was so cool. We were nominated for an Emmy. This was before, we got, Women's on Heart Disease was such a powerful movement. But what I learned from that is that people were willing to share their stories. Experts were willing to sort of weigh in and sort of give advice. And the power of storytelling and patients and other women seeing this felt empowered. And, oh my gosh, I can identify with this person. So the idea, you fast forward now almost 20 years, and my colleague, Dr. Stacy Rosen, and I, Dr. Sharon Hayes, Lori Russo, who's working with us, we sort of looked at where we are as a nation, as a society, in women understanding that they're at risk for heart disease, the awareness. We figured that there was still a sort of disconnect. They were not transforming the knowledge into action. And more importantly, as Dr. Nanette Wenger, who's one of the gurus in this space, said, they were not, there was a paucity of finances for more sex and research and sex and gender research in this area. And so we felt, let's go back to the power of storytelling. Dr. Rosen has a busy practice. We and I travel across the country for the American Heart Association. We met some amazing women who were willing to share their stories. And we decided it was going to be an all-female team. We teamed up with Trish Reagan, who had produced the Emmy-winning documentary, Autism the Musical. And we set out to tell the stories of women that had sort of survived their challenging episodes with heart disease. And what our goal is really to highlight the fact that, yes, there are still gender disparities, that women are at risk for heart disease just as men, but the symptoms may be a little bit subtle, and it depends on the age, right? Most women in the setting of a heart attack will show up, as the American Heart Association said, with some sort of chest discomfort, but there's a broad spectrum of symptoms. And so this documentary, Misdiagnosed, we highlight the stories of these 4 amazing women who have had encounters with heart disease. They didn't follow their gut. They knew that something was wrong, but they were ignored. And we tell the stories with experts to sort of issue a call to action that women can be empowered. They need to know that they have to be true advocates or get someone to advocate with them to change the way you interact with your doctor or the lens through which you see that interaction. And we also have experts from across the country. We have Dr. Robert Harrington, the president of the AHA right now, chair of medicine at Stanford, who actually is on film talking about the need for us to sort of expand the way we deliver healthcare. We need to look at it from a sex and gender approach. So this has been a journey. We are going to premiere at CineQuest in early March and at the Women's Film Festival in Brattleboro, Vermont. And we are still fundraising. We still have a reach to do because we still have to fine tune and do some editing. And we are working on fine-tuning and refining the film to get it ready for television for a much broader audience.
It's an incredible film. The stories, and I really, the thing that kind of stuck with me was this one of the women telling her story and saying that she was diagnosed with anxiety, because it's
yes,
crazy.
And that's part of the course, right?
Right.
And part of it is we as women, we go to the doctors, right? And there is sort of this fear of sharing information or being made to feel less than, right? When you describe your symptoms. And so this is to say, you go in, you have to be an advocate, you sort of have to take control. And if you have a doctor you're not feeling, follow your gut, you're not feeling the connection, it's time to find someone else. Importantly, though, and I think it's what we want women to know, when something is wrong, you know your body, something is wrong, do not say, I'll wait until tomorrow. Call 911 if you think you're having a heart attack, especially if you're at risk for heart disease. Do not delay. And we are guilty of doing that. You're like, oh my gosh, this pain, it's probably nothing,
So we were talking about gender and the differences people face when it comes to healthcare, and I don't want to ignore the differences that come up from both in ethnic and racial perspective as well. February's Black History Month, Heart Awareness Month, and we know that there is still bias in the healthcare field. There is research, there is a lot of stuff out there you can read, and I'd like to get your thoughts on it, and particularly your advice for women, and particularly women of color who are trying to navigate.
So no question that bias plays a role in healthcare delivery. And, as part of our work at Northwell, where we're looking at ways to improve the healthcare delivery method for diverse populations, for all populations, one of the key factors we know, and the evidence is overwhelming, that unconscious bias exists. We all are biased. We grow up in families. There's bias within families, right? We make judgments, and that is true in healthcare. But one of the key factors we know, in addition to that can be a barrier to adhering to a medical treatment plan, we can break that down into 3 different things. One, patient-related. So we know your health literacy, your culture will impact whether you take your medications or whether you follow a plan. The third column is medical-related. And medical professionals, and one big piece is unconscious bias. You see people, you make judgments, you make assumptions, and the evidence even published in the New England Journal of Medicine that, patients of color get less care. So it is real. And then the third column we talk about, and this is data from published by a group at the Mayo Clinic, is institutional racism, all of that. That is truly real. my thinking on this is that we have got to change the healthcare delivery model. So what we're doing at Northwell, we have introduced our cultural competency training for our medical students, for our nursing students across the entire health system, the 70,000 employees. And recently we added unconscious bias training to let people know, listen, we all have biases, but there are ways to mitigate bias. And that when you're seeing someone, your fast brain will quickly make an assumption based on, your history or things that helped you become who you are. And that you just have to hit the pause button and decide, what is this person telling me? How do I need to adjust? Because my job is focused on delivering care.
Is there anything you would like to leave our listeners with?
I would like us all to think of how we could, as a human race, reconnect, reignite humanism, treating each other with dignity and respect. And so as you think about this, you go back to your place of work or whatever, think of one small thing you could do to sort of reignite the humanism, the connectivity, the kindness, the generosity of spirit, where every voice is valued.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us and having some time to talk to me today.
Oh my gosh, such a great pleasure.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening to Ellevate. If you like what you hear, help a girl out. Subscribe to the Ellevate podcast on iTunes, give us 5 stars, and share your review. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at EllevateNTWK, that's Ellevate Network, and become a member. You can learn all about membership and all the great things that Ellevate Network is doing at our website, www.ellevatenetwork.com. That's ELLEVATE network.com. And special thanks to our producer, Catherine Heller. She rocks. And to our voiceover artist, Rachel Griesinger. Thanks so much, and join us next week.